All right, perfect. Thank you so much. I think most of us are now back. Bjorn, if you can just check for me that the onlines are back, and I hope everyone's had a chance to get some coffee, something to drink, some snacks. I could see some healthy conversations going on outside, which means this has stimulated some discussions, which is great. I think let's continue with the program itself. So I think the last part of the panel engagement is largely let's call it the feedback that we'll get from Mark. I think we're keen to understand, what does the Department of Water and Sanitation, how do they approach this? How do they bring standards into requirements within the department? How is this monitored, measured? What kind of responses and feedback do they get? And then more importantly, in terms of interactions with departments like SABS, the national regulator, are there certain requirements that the department would really like us to consider as improvements that can enhance the process itself? So I think at a fairly high level, I'm not going to do the Katima bit where I go with too many questions. I'll leave it there. Mark, over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. And thanks, colleagues, for being here to listen to me. Department of Water and Sanitation is probably not it's not got a great reputation at the moment after the recent water issues in Gauteng. And I'll talk to you a little bit about those and how it relates to the standards that we've got. But first of all, I just want to start by saying how the issue of standards we rely on so much in terms of our business. Without standards, we can't do our business in the way that we want to do, and I think that's kind of fairly obvious. The way I like to talk about our business is to break it into three components. The first component being the water resource side of the business. The Department of Water is the custodian of the raw water that we have in South Africa, and we then basically sell the raw water from the dams to the water boards and the bulk water service providers, who then go ahead and treat the water before, that's the second component, the bulk water supply. And then it gets treated and then sold on to the water service authorities. And there's 144 of those in the country responsible for delivery of water service authorities to the consumers. Now, those three components, the resource, the bulk, and the water services side, all have different requirements in terms of SABS, and the standards that they provide. On the resource side, Department of Water are owning the dams, and then the water boards will actually generally look after the operation and maintenance of those on our behalf. But in terms of the procurement process that we require to appoint service providers to procure materials, pipes, scaffolding, whatever it may be, then we need those standards to be clear within the procurement process that we have to ensure that we have both sustainability and compliance within the sector. Because if we don't have that, then things are going to collapse. Materials and equipment are not going to last for as long as they're expected to, or whatever. So I know I sit on the bid spec committee, where we review all the documents which are going out to tender to the private sector in particular. And there's a host of standards in there to ensure that the sector comply with what's required, etc. So again, a fundamental part of that side of the business. Without those, then we can't build the infrastructure that we need in a sustainable and compliant fashion. Then you get to the water board side, which is the bulk water supply. And we've already mentioned SANS 241. It's their responsibility to take the raw water and treat it to SANS 241, so it's potable and usable by the consumers. Again, within their space, the water treatment plants, the wastewater treatment plants. We host a number of those 7,500 standards that was mentioned before to help run that business. And what the Department of Water does, we, in that component number 2, is that we help the flow of funding. So we've got the Regional Bulk Infrastructure Grant, which we use to help fund bulk water infrastructure. And we'll review and assess and approve applications for funding for RBIG, also for WESIG, which is the Water Services Infrastructure Grant. And as an engineer, myself, again, we're looking for compliance in terms of the process, in terms of the materials being provided, and we refer to many of the relevant standards that are necessary for those. So again, it's the kind of cement amongst the infrastructure that we're reviewing. It's something which we can't approve something without the relevant standards in place. Then the bulk water supply service providers like Ram Water and Umgeni Water go and sell the water to the 144 WSAs, and they have a responsibility then to distribute it to the households. And that's when issues such as meters that were mentioned before are very key. In fact, the meters are important right across the space, from water resource to water services, but they provide a different service in terms of their requirements. So right across those 3 different areas, SABS and the standards that are provided are essential. And yet Department of Water is still having challenges. We're still having problems, as you well know. One of those is the implementation of effective infrastructure asset management, the funding thereof, the practices that need to be managed. So we're having equipment which is in the ground, which is reaching its sell-by date, but we're still using them. And this is quite a challenge. But so the application of infrastructure asset management in itself has a lot of standards which need to be complied with to make sure that the equipment being provided is sustainable and lasts for its design life and does what it's expected to do. The second one is water use efficiency, water conservation, demand management, and that's already been highlighted as well. At the moment, we're losing nationally about 45% of the water which is being treated is going back into the ground. Actually, 35% of is leakage going back into the ground. 45% is non-revenue water. And we can't afford to carry on like that. At the moment, the water supply that we've got is sufficient to meet our needs. But by 2030, we're going to have a 30% deficit. And so we need to reduce the water that we use. We need to make sure that the leaks are fixed. And those leaks not only affect the shortage of water or the availability of water that we have, but things like, you mentioned also about Hammondscrell and the cholera issue a couple of weeks ago. As soon as you've got a lot of pipes which are experiencing leakage, and then you have the combination of things like load shedding, so for times those pipes are sitting empty, and if it's at a high water level, water table, the groundwater can ingress into the pipes, and then suddenly you're actually impacting the quality of the water. So you might have SANS 241 going down the pipes, then suddenly you get load shedding, where the pipes go empty. You get an ingress of dirty water from the groundwater, water which has not been treated, and then you've got problems such as we had in Hammondscrell. There's a lot of other factors that relate to that, but that's certainly one of them. So again, when it comes to standards, the standards that we apply when we're doing procurement ensure that the materials last for the design life that they've got. But then you've got to have operation and maintenance as well. And the maintenance needs to be effective to make sure that things do last for the life that they're expected to go for. So there's a host of different again standards which are so necessary. The other issue we have the other challenge besides infrastructure asset management and water conservation is the performance of the WSAs. Some of the metros are performing really well, but there's a lot of WSAs which are struggling. And from a point of view of being accountable, performance management, lack of resources, skills, and again, we need to turn that around going forward. And part of that is having the right people in the right jobs who can do the work. And you know, we need to look at standards in terms of skills for certain tasks. Department of Water is training process controllers, for example, so that they people who are appointed who really know the job. And that's a question I've got in terms of how standards can apply to the softer issues to make sure that the performance management of WSAs and the people employed can be adhered to. So those are the three key issues which are a challenge. One other hat that I wear at the Department of Water is the SDG 6 coordinator. That SDG 6, for those who don't know, stands for the Sustainable Development Goals. We've got 17 of those. And I've got a team of more than 100 people that are implementing that project countrywide. And as a project, it's actually doing well. But in terms of addressing the gaps, it requires input by the sector to deal with those. Now, each of the SDG 6 compiles 8 different targets, all of which are quite diverse, from provision of clean water and water quality in rural areas, which is different to what we had with the MDGs. Sanitation, we've got the water resource quality, we've got water conservation, demand management, and we've got integrated water resource management. Each of those require different standards which can help us to close those gaps. And what's key is that the sector, who are the implementing arm of the SDGs, comply with those standards. So the involvement of yourselves, for example, is key in the process. So when SABS have these technical committees, we need your inputs and your expertise to make sure that we can develop standards which are appropriate and applicable and can be adhered to going forward. There's a lot of standards there that we use already, like I mentioned, but there's issues coming out now through SDG 6 which require new standards. And that's where it's our job to, again, build up that relationship with SABS to try and make those happen and to bring yourselves into the picture to make sure that we have something which is quality. So, for example, on 6.2, which relates to sanitation, there's the introduction of fecal sludge management, which is something which is not being given sufficient attention in the past. So there's various standards which are being considered and looked at to implement fecal sludge management in a sustainable and compliant way. I was fortunate this week, actually, I was at the International Water Association conference, which focused on dry sanitation. There's a standard, it's an international standard, ISO 30500, which relates to non-sewer sanitation or dry sanitation. And we need to take what's in there and evolve it to make South Africa-specific standards related to dry sanitation, so that we can make sure that it's a very suitable alternative going forward. So there's opportunities there for new standards through that. The other thing I wanted to mention is the Department of Water is trying to be proactive with regards to new innovations. So if somebody is sitting in their garage and they develop a new idea, then we develop a process which will help those innovations to get accreditation. And at the end of the process, if you like, the idea is that they would receive accreditation through SABS or through Agrement or through CSIR or whatever platforms there are, so they can market those products in the marketplace. And we've got a technical knowledge centre which allows accredited products to be promoted through that platform. We're not allowed to promote ourselves one product over another, but we can provide that platform for people to upload their product information and services information so that the sector can then look and see what's available and purchase that equipment or procure that equipment as required. But the innovation side is something which has only really been advanced in the last couple of years. And we've got MOUs with SABS, we've got MOU with CSIR, the Water Research Commission, which is again another platform that innovation can take off. And so we're already working together with various partners to make the Technical Knowledge Centre something which is a viable resource to people who want to get into the marketplace. And again, I think most of the people here in the audience today are from the private sector. I think there's some parastatal, I don't know who else, but ultimately this can have benefits to everybody. Again, just focusing on the private sector for the moment as well, since I've mentioned it, the SDG 6 program that I'm coordinating has a special task team. We have 5 cross-cutting task teams actually which support the 8 targets, but one of them is the Water and Sanitation Sector Leadership Group, which we meet every quarter, and basically to inform of progress in terms of SDG 6. Every year we look at the gap, and every year we look to see how much the gaps have closed per indicator. But it requires the sector to actually drive the projects on the ground. So SDG 6 measures the gaps. It develops an action report, which then feeds into what's called the National Water and Sanitation Master Plan, which you may or may not have heard of. Volume 3 of the Master Plan has more than 5,000 projects and programs incorporated. And it's supposed to be like the Bible of the water and sanitation business. So all the sector role players are supposed to align themselves with the projects in Volume 3. Once again, the plan itself refers to various standards that have to be met and complied with. And now it's being revised at the moment. It's due to be released at the end of the year. We need to reconsider or look at other standards which are applicable. For example, I know I'm very biased, but it was very quiet on issues of inclusivity and infrastructure which is suitable for people with disabilities. So that's something which I've been pushing to make sure the relevant standards are included in that. So I think I'm one of the only people growing up in the UK. You've still got to try and guess where I am from the UK. But growing up in the UK as an engineer, every water and wastewater treatment plant I ever designed and constructed, they all have a nice accessible toilet and ramps where instead of steps wherever possible. So I made it my objective to try and make these infrastructure more inclusive. So the SDG 6 program needs the sector to be involved and to comply, otherwise we're not going to meet the 2030 objectives. And the other initiative which I wanted to mention, which promotes that, the Minister and the Development Bank of South Africa initiated the Project Office, which encourages PPPs. Quite often in the past, private sector has said, you know, we really want to get involved in your business, but we just don't know how to get into the marketplace. We don't know how to get on board with some of these opportunities. And the Project Office is there to do so. And so, again, it's an opportunity for those in the room to see how they can get involved in the water and sanitation business so that we can help close the gaps of the SDG 6 and use their initiatives that they've got to try and make it happen. Yeah, I mean, this topic I can probably go on all day, and I'm not going to do so because we need to have some questions. But I think I've highlighted some key important ones there with the Project Office, the Technical Knowledge Centre, the new standards that we need, particularly around dry sanitation and areas such as infrastructure, asset management, water conservation, demand management, which can help close those gaps and turn the sector around. And then we won't have situations arising like we had at Hammondstraw, what we don't want is water shedding, and that's something which everyone was worrying about a few weeks ago. And let me tell you as a final point that the issue of the water shedding experience in Johannesburg and Pretoria a few weeks ago, there's enough water there, but the problem is that we're putting water into a bucket which is full of holes. So by the time it actually gets to the consumer, we've lost that 45% of water back into the ground, and then we've got the contamination issues that I mentioned before. So that's where we need to try and turn things around, and the standards that we've got now can be used more effectively, and new standards developed to make that happen. Bring in your own expertise, then I think it's the future can look good. On that note, Chair, let me leave it there. Thank you.
Great stuff. Thanks so much for that, Mark. I think we learn something every day. So the point I think that stands out for me is the point you've raised around, the leakages. Because when you see, I think whenever I picture leakages, I see loss of water, and I think you started off there. But the point around that, coupled with load shedding and its impact on contamination, is an angle I've never thought about. And it just shows you how there's unintended consequences, and that's what we're facing. So very interesting point, and thanks, Mark, for that. I think Mark's highlighted some very, very key points. I think we reach a point now where I can really acknowledge and thank my panel. I think you've done a sterling job of setting the scene for possibly some questions or even comments that delegates would like to raise. So we'll handle it in multiple ways. Do we have roving mics? Excellent, thanks. So just maybe if you can indicate there's a roving mic, we'll take maybe 3 questions at a time. And then we have some that are online, so Bjorn will coordinate that. But let's take 3 from the room first, if we can. So 3 questions from the room, just by a show of hands. There we go. We've got 3 hands. Excellent, thanks. So Sam, we'll start with you. Great.
Can you guys hear me now? To the program director, thank you for this. I think it was long awaited. I think I'm going to start with a question with the last speaker. There's a lot of points which you highlighted with regards to leaks and contamination. Why are we not regulating those standards for the procurement process? It's voluntary at this point in time.
Great. I think let's take the second and third question, and then I'll allow my panel to come in. Great. Thanks.
Okay. First question would be probably to Tabu on the testing. So Electrolux, we manufacture water heaters, probably one of the bigger manufacturers in South Africa. And we had a relationship with the SABS probably now 67 years. We started our first permit scheme in 1956. And I think we all know that the SABS over the years haven't produced as they're supposed to. And, it affected us as a business. We had to take our testing elsewhere. So just probably this year we spent more than R1 million at other testing facilities. Because the turnaround time on tests take more than a year, and if there's something small that's wrong with the test, to fix that's another year. And then obviously we need to comply with the NRCS with those test reports. So we're also under pressure with that. So I would like to see from the SABS what's the plans and sort of the timelines to make sure these tests get back to the turnaround times they used to be.
Thank you very much. I think my colleague here has covered one of the questions I wanted to ask, because I wanted to check how far or how, let me say how far does your relationship or collaboration in terms of work with the local municipalities, because that's where these issues happens, but also particularly on issues of water leakage. But again, it goes to the next question with Makaselwa. In terms of the standards, and the regulations. I think the question cuts across on the standards and the regulations in terms of the water meters, because it's a mess on the ground.
Thank you very much for that. I think let's pause there for a moment. We'll take those as 3 questions. Let's then, Mark, I think if you can take the first part of it, if you can. Over to you.
Sure, and thank you very much for those questions. They're very relevant, and certainly the issue of leakage is quite dire, and there's something which there's a number of different initiatives which are being followed to try and address that, and regulating standards to, what I was saying, to actually try and turn those things around are something which it needs to be strengthened for sure. I think when it comes to the municipalities, when we approve, for example, our big funding, WESIC funding, which I mentioned before, then we don't allow the funding to be approved or released until they've addressed issues of water conservation and demand management. So, for example, if a municipality is applying for our big funding to build a water treatment plant, then we won't approve that funding until they've got a conservation and demand management plan in place, which is approved by council and is going to be implemented over the coming years. Because if they're sitting with, again, 45% leakage, then the answer is not to go and build a new water treatment plant to produce more water, which is going to go straight back in the ground. The idea is that the leaks are actually fixed first. So they're given targets to deal with that. And SDG 6 also works very closely with our Directorate of Water Use Efficiency. And even though I can't speak specifically on some of those issues that they're pursuing, or their activities that they're pursuing, there's a lot of work which is going on to make sure that those targets, so those gaps are reduced. There's a program on 8 large water systems which incorporates, the kind of key systems in the country, with a lot of different initiatives there. I'm just thinking of something else which I want to mention in terms of regulatory. I think you've heard of the Blue Drop and Green Drop report that we've got, or the program that we've got. We started the No Drop program, which is just about the data of which is supposed to be released this month. And that looks particularly at water leakage and non-revenue water within the municipalities, within the water boards, within the sector as a whole. And the idea is that the gaps that are identified can be turned around through specific interventions and regulatory measures. So those kind of initiatives, again, I would need my experts in those areas to answer your question more specifically. But I think what I'm saying is that as the department, we're there to support the municipalities in their business with regards to water services, and those initiatives that we got are trying to turn that around. But the problem is that quite often the funding which is made available is not prioritised in the areas that it's supposed to. So water conservation and demand management issues are not prioritised over other activities that a municipality is expected to deliver upon, and then those things get missed. So we're trying to turn that around through those kind of initiatives. I'll get your contact afterwards. I'll put you in contact with Mr. Kalani Hadebi, who's our Director on Water Conservation, and he'll be able to give you some more specific insights to that. Thank you.
Right. I think that's perfect, Mark. I think that's needed, right? There's something that's coming through, because I don't think we can solve, or you can solve, or an area can solve things in isolation. But it's how we get the collective together. And I think these questions are going to stimulate the need for that to happen. So let's keep those in mind. I think those are important points. I'll allow for follow-ups. Okay, let's... Yeah, let's just get the guys and we'll come back in, right? So we'll close out on this. I want to just go to Thabo, but before I do that, I just want to just introduce Gordon. If you can just stand for a second so the colleagues can just know that. So Gordon is our sales lead that focuses on this area of the business. And, as Thabo provides the response and as we start looking at work to reduce turnaround times and to get back business that we might have lost, these are important interventions. This is where Gordon will come in, but he'll work closely with the team within Sabs to make sure that works. Over to you. Thanks, Gordon. Over to you, Thabo.
Thanks, Chair, and you have already answered my question. No, thanks for the feedback on the issues related to our long or unacceptably long turnaround times. It's feedback that we have been receiving in our engagement with clients and is consistent with the problems we are trying to sort internally. So the likes of Gordon then becomes an internal voice of customers, so that you don't have to be dealing with a range of trying to find us in the business. So Gordon will be your man in that respect. And this is us responding to one specific item, which is that we have not been responsive to basic inquiries. And as a result, we also realize that our communication with our clients ought to be drastically improved. That's why this intervention. But we also have other observations that contributes to longer turnaround times. One of the fundamentals, which is one that we are now sorting out, is to improve our planning and scheduling of work internally. Because if we resolve that as a first line of responding, it will be easier for Gordon to give you feedback on where your test is. But importantly, we have also then recognized that we need to move faster with speed in terms of modernizing our business. And that includes a key project that we are implementing to implement a laboratory-wide information management system, which will be an enabling mechanism for us to then give you updates. The last point in response to this, and maybe it's also intertwined, we have also realized that there is a gap between us and clients when we do contract review. We do not necessarily do it to the level of detail that empowers you as a client to have a fuller appreciation of what is involved in your test, why it will take the timelines that we are telling you, even to the extent that, to your point, after a year we get feedback that there's this minor thing that we needed to sort out, and only then are we going to restart the process again. But if that is covered at contract review phase, it makes it easier for the communication to flow, so that if there is something, and we have already upfront agreed that at different stages we'll give you feedback, that can then solve it. I've also stated earlier, Chair, that in instances where our turnaround times are impacted because of capacity challenges internally, the partnerships that I'm talking about with other labs is to try and resolve that. And so when you don't have to be the one taking your samples elsewhere to try and find other labs. But then we are moving into a space where we would want to be able to provide a one-stop shop service. If we have capacity challenges, we'll notify you that we have capacity challenges, but we also have a partner that if you allow us, we can take your samples there for testing so that we speed up the process. And that, of course, takes away the headache from you to us to ensure that whoever we are subcontracting to operate at an acceptable level of service. That lab is either accredited. If it's not accredited, there are checks and balances that we put in place ourselves to ensure that the test outcomes are never questionable. But I think the feedback is consistent with what we have already realized in the business, and we are responding to it. Thanks, Chair. And lastly, I think what in instances where we internally have capacity, we are busy with your test outcome or test process. Lately, there are other things that are coming and they are becoming part of the norm, like load shedding. Power interrupts our business, and we have to restart, in some cases, the testing process. We are slowly but surely responding because we are now implementing power backups, isolating them to key areas where such interruptions would necessitate us restarting. And in some instances, we extend the week. Our normal week is 5 days, but for some labs, owed to us having more work, we extend it to 7 days under those circumstances. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks so much for that. And I think when we kicked off the session this morning, we were addressed by the Chief Operating Officer that shared the developments within the organization. And one of those that supports and talks to this particular point is the organizational structure that we've been working towards. And as of literally now, as of the end of September, we've placed our teams into the new operating model. And within the environment of Gordon's teams, there are multiple teams taking care of different sectors. But those teams, so Gordon as the sales lead, is supported by officers' key accounts and basically officers that take care of new business as well. And what we're doing through this approach is making sure that there's a focused approach, and that communication gap that we've previously experienced, it's our mechanism to start to close that gap. So we're really hoping that as we start testing this, you will be giving us that feedback to say, this is working, this is not working, and how we can further improve that as we go forward. I think that the last part, and I'll allow for a quick follow-up on this because I think it was questions that a few parts may have not been fully answered. I just want to give the NRCS, Skubana, if you can come in. There was one part of it that related to looking for some feedback from you, if you would tackle that.
Oh, thank you, Chair. On the issue of a lot of water meters that are within the industry that are non-compliant, or that you come across that you perceive that it's giving problems, the NRCS has a solution for that, which is you are able to call in and also report your concern. Your concern will be registered and will respond after we go and check that meter or any issues that you have raised. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Or any issues that you have raised. So if you are also able to report it anonymously. In that case, we'll still go and check that meter that you reported on or that importer that you have reported on. If you reported and we've got your details, we will give feedback on whether that meter was compliant or not compliant. So there are those mechanisms where you are able to report, because as a regulator, we cannot be everywhere anytime. We depend on you guys to report those cases to us so that we can investigate, so that everybody that is within the industry have a fair chance so that they can comply and not so that our industry is not flooded by non-compliant devices. But that door is always open, and we do give feedback. Thanks.
Great stuff. Thank you so much for that. There was a follow-up. Is that still, Sam, is still a follow-up that, and there's the mic coming to you, yeah?
Yes, it's Mr. Bannister again. You've addressed things on a high level. I think what we were talking about is a more direct approach to the municipalities for the procurement process in the short term. You spoke about the SGD 6 or something like that. It's the first time we ever heard about it. So I think in the short term we need to have something that's more practical in terms of communication with the municipalities for the procurement process of buying compliant products. And then I just want to refer to JASIC, which is a joint acceptance scheme for water installation components, which is the various municipalities, which is very strong in Tikwini. And they don't always apply logic in terms of the procurement process. And we find that a lot of the leaks that you're talking about and the water leakages and the water wastages stems from that procurement process. So I think it's something that you need to do on a more shorter term to try and save the water that we wasted.
Thanks, great. Matlale, I think you wanted to come in. Let's give you an opportunity. Yeah.
No, thanks, Chair. I thought I should also just make one comment with regards to the very first question that was asked, where the DWS working with industry, how they can then make use of standards and reference them, call them up. Just maybe to inform the audience that of late, recently, and when I say recently, I mean a week or two ago, we entered into an agreement with DWS where they are going to have access to the entire collection of our standards. And that would then allow them to know which standards already exist. Because Mark was talking about, the need for new standards to be developed to support the projects in their master plan also. So that also could then assist as they go forward instead of, starting from scratch. But previously all they had was a catalog with a list similar to what I have here that just lists the standards numbers. But the difference with this agreement that we've signed with them is that they would then have access to the content, the full content of those publications. And we hope that will also assist where they could know that if we're losing 45% of water through the distribution system, is there a standard that exists? So they can see that, there is that one there that exists. Let's call it up. And maybe to your point, Sam, where they then work with municipalities to say, you need to ensure that you call these standards up if people were to, supply you with any services. Thank you very much, Chair.
Yeah, there's a similar drive, very similar to what you've put together in place for the DWS with a suite of standards to take that same model to other municipalities. So it's something that the teams are working closely with. This is the customer partnering team together with our standards division, working closely to try and make sure that we get these suites out to as many municipalities as possible. Those were good points because if it's called for at the start, then you've got an opportunity of it working. If it's not mentioned at all, then we're just on a road to nowhere. So, one of the difficulties with this is you've got to start somewhere. And we found that giving access to these standards is a good starting point. There's two hands I've got from my panelists, so Katima and then Mark.
So, Chair, thanks. For the record, I work for Sabs. Not the So, I think mine is just an input to the discussion. Sometimes from the questions that are asked, the issue of alignment is critical because some of these functions, it's a concurrent mandate. National, local government, and it tends to be disjointed. I'm not competent to speak about this, but that's what we find. And this alignment is important. And then it tends to assist to alleviate some of these concerns. So probably through some of the stakeholder engagements and so on, this issue needs to be flagged so that it can really assist in addressing some of these concerns. And some of the comments raised around need for regulation. And there is a need for industry, even themselves, to also drive for this, to push for it. To say the reason why it's required. Because sometimes if that pressure is also not coming, some of these things are not attended to. I'm not talking to my colleague on the right that we must go bend tires, but I'm saying this pressure needs to be exerted there so that it can be appreciated why some of the regulations are required. There are other commentators who are advocating for self-regulation, but questions are, as a nation, are we matured enough to really play in that space? Probably elsewhere in Europe it's fine, but in our context, what does it mean? So there needs to be appreciation of the context that we find ourselves as a country. Thank you, Chair.
Just 2 points I wanted to make. The first point relating to compliance by the WSAs. The Department of Water is currently revising their norms and standards for the water and sanitation business itself, which again will be aligned with the various standards in SABS, but ultimately the water service authorities that are in the country, and there's 144 of them, for them to implement projects, they develop a water services development plan, and that plan is aligned with their IDPs, but it has to comply with the norms and standards that have been developed by the Department of Water, and again aligned with the SABS. So there's a process there which encourages WSAs to make sure that they are compliant in that regard. So that's a regulation function itself. The second point I just wanted to make, and it relates to the high water leakage that we've got. And we've got to not forget that it's not just about high water leakage, but it's also about the technologies that we use in the sector, which are quite often outdated and use a lot of water. It's the same with your geysers at home and things like that. There's inefficient technology and there's effective technology. Now, interestingly, on the sanitation side, I'm sure everyone in this room has got a flushing toilet, which hasn't changed much since the Queen Victoria days, and it's using between 6 and 12 litres of water for every flush. And all it's doing is transporting the solids, sometimes 20 kilometres to the nearest wastewater treatment plant. And we're using clean, fresh drinking water to do that. It's total waste. So this conference I've been to the last few days is looking at some really good new technologies produced by South Africa. And we're going to hopefully have a revolution in the country in terms of this, so that we can change mindsets to get off flush and then move to a dry type of sanitation, because we'll save so much money in terms of infrastructure, operation and maintenance costs, and there's a lot of productivity that can be used with the waste that's there. So I think in terms of new standards, because of the changing technology and the adoption of that technology, we need to have standards to make sure that they align with those. And I think there's a huge opportunity in that particular area, which will really contribute towards that potential 30% deficit of water that we may have by 2030 if we don't do anything. So I just wanted to highlight that point.
Great, thanks, Mark. Let's take the next round of questions. Bjorn, if you can ready up, there's one in the room, or two in the room. All right, so we'll take 3 in the room, and then beyond the next 3, we'll do on the online. So if you can get that in readiness, over to you, sir.
In terms of standards, it's well and good to have all standards we have, but my question is policing of the standards. How do we as industry protect ourselves against substandard material coming into our markets and competing against us?
Good morning. My question is somewhat a stupid one, but it's related to DWS. We've seen a lot of intrusions into water resources, even in affluent places like Hartbeespoort Dam, where people are sitting exactly on the flood lines, such that that resource cannot even breed at the moment. The fact that we already have some of these standards or regulations, don't we have a mechanism to enforce those rules so that you are able to intervene in those areas and somewhat remove people from areas where they are actually affecting the resource, where we're actually getting the water? Thank you.
Hi. So my question is related to several of the other questions. I think a lot have been said about partnership, collaboration. I think we all understand or appreciate the importance of the standards and implementation. It comes to the implementation of the standard. On the one side, I would just be straight off. I believe in the country there's a lot of resources for testing and certification. I think I'm not sure to what extent we all understand that testing and certification remains a commercial business, and there are private organizations offering exactly the same in competition with the SABS. And I think it is important not to discount those organizations, to make sure that the resources can be jointly used for the benefit of the country as a whole, so that products can be verified and tested to ensure that the standards gets complied with. I think at the end of the day, having standards available that nobody applies is causing more danger, more damage, because it just perpetuates non-compliance and perpetuates the problem. I think that's a very strong driving point, and there's strong resources available to support this in the country.
Okay, thank you very much. There were three questions. Katima, I think I'm going to lean towards you to kick it off, and then we'll get the team to support. Over to you, Katima.
Thanks, Chair. I must say that we work for the Bureau of Standards, and we need a standard, whether to call you program director or chair or I don't know, but my colleague will have to register that as a project. On issue of policing substandards products, and probably the regulator is here, and also on that side, they can also comment about that. So I think it depends. It's informed by the mandate of various institutions. So we as SABS, back in the days, in terms of Standards Act of 1993, we were a regulator. So there's been changes, which resulted into the new entity, National Regulator for Compulsory Specific. So they manage the regulations. So issues of enforcement, powers of entry and all of that, they do all those things. So where we play in a voluntary space, but indirectly we can equally complement regulators, because we tend to be co-opted and requested to support the object of a particular regulator. So the point I'm trying to make here, as in when there are constraints, capacity issues, if the regulator is struggling, SABS is equally as an inspectorate function that we also provide. So we will not be there at the ports of entry and borders and stop the goods, perhaps like what we used to do in the past. So that mandate resides elsewhere. But if the regulator says we need capacity to be complemented on the ground and even elsewhere, we remain available to do so. So I think that's one point that we always emphasize. But also the issue of, I hear my colleague there on resources to be used by other CVs, you know. This is our former colleague, Herman Strauss. He's always SABS. He's from SABS, so everything he knows, he learned it here. So, and I think that is appreciated, and my colleague has spoken to partnerships and collaboration and all of that. At a macro level, it's important for the country. You know, we sometimes we have to detach ourselves. In the interest of the country, is there a service available? And if it is there, it's all systems go. We are happy to do that, you know. But competitively, we are very aggressive. This is our space, this is our business, and we will protect it. And I always say this is an institution built to last. So it is going nowhere. We just have to restore other issues where we have gaps, what colleagues have raised in this session. I'm not discounting small and emerging. It's important, it's part of the game. And it's acceptable, it's a norm, it's a policy of the country. We are for that. But we are saying, where I go, I say work with institutions. I'm biased. For now, I'm playing for this team. I'm here. And I grew up here. So an institution, it's strong, and it remains strong. Sometimes it's not a soft issue. Sometimes these things go down to the wire where there are legal issues. And these are now contested. It talks to the muscle to defend such issues. And there we're not talking small issues. So association matters. Who you associate. I'm not here to discount SMMEs, but I'm defending a Sabs position deliberately because there's context and there's merit to it. But we acknowledge that we need to ramp up issues of service delivery and service excellence to all our customers. Chair, can I leave it there? Thanks.
I just want to check then, Mark, is there anything you want to add, or maybe yourself, Ms. Kubane?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And it was in response to the question from the back and unauthorised connections, which is obviously a key problem nationwide, and it makes up the difference between the 35% of leakage and the 45% non-revenue water. It falls in that latter 10%. The delivery of water services in terms of the Constitution is given to the water service authorities. And so when it comes to unauthorised connections, it's their responsibility to actually address and deal with those. And what the department has done is to develop a document called the Management of Unauthorised Connections to guide WSAs in terms of the legislation, and gives suggested processes to follow to actually disconnect and legalise those. But ultimately, the fact that communities are doing that, obviously they're desperate for water, and it's important then for the WSAs to acknowledge this and to build it into their water services development plans, so they provide a legal and proper service to the people in those particular areas. So I think I just wanted to clarify what the role of the department is and what the role of the WSAs who are governed by COGTA, and we're there to guide that process. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. On the issue of non-compliant water meters in the industry, I think I've already responded to the gentleman there. The issue there is that if there's anything that we have missed at the border, or when we are doing inspections, or when we are doing approvals, and you do pick up that in the industry, please contact the NRCS so that we can be able to address those measuring equipments. The Act does allow us to distract, to prosecute, and also to instruct whoever brought in those equipment to return them to the country of origin. There is a place where we can all work together to make sure that everything complies within the industry. However, we also need you guys, when you pick up things, to also report them, so that we don't have a lot of complaints about things are not complying. However, as the regulator, we are a very small institution, about 300 and something. We can't be able to pick up all these things, but you guys are on the ground. When you pick up these things, please, let's work together and make the whole country comply. Thanks.
Go ahead, Katima.
Allow the regulator to speak on that issue, and I think eloquently so, they have done so. But there's also a role we can also play in the context that not everything can be regulated. And I think we agree on that score. But procurers have power. and can make that decision to say, what I'm procuring, I want it for, it should be of a certain standard. And that requires a lot of information dissemination. And it's something that we do a lot. So in that context, say where you know you're playing in a particular space, you're a Sabs client, part of what we do is this mobilization, encouraging and educating procurers to procure using standards, including certification and testing. And sometimes when we continue to, because leaders come and go and in various entities and organizations, but continuously as part of information dissemination, it's another angle that we also use, because the procurer, they outline the requirements. What is it that they want, whether it's replacements of spares, etc., whatever the case may be. But if they are clear on what they want to say, I want a certified product, then a certified product must be supplied. So in the absence of regulation. Thank you.
I think thanks for that. I think from my side, just on a side note, I'm based in KwaZulu-Natal, and I connect in very often to meetings like this between myself in Durban and this being the head office. And what tends to happen very often is that I get forgotten because I'm there in Durban. They can't see me. I'm somewhere on a screen. Everybody in the room is talking, and they forget the guys on this other side. So it'll be wrong of me as the program manager or chair to ignore the guys that are on the other side. So Bjorn, if you can, please step in. Can you read out those questions from the guys on the online platform? Over to you, Bjorn. Bjorn, if we can segment that in threes, just so that we don't... Over to you, Bjorn.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. I'm just going to go back to the questions that were in our chat, because those are the ones that came through. First one was from Yolanda Johnson. Yolanda, I will release your mic and video as well, but I will just first do your question. How do you ensure that all products are certified, and also the lab company, meaning these products are certified based on ISO 9001? Do you require evidence of everything? Because they may have certification, but they don't have tangible documents as evidence to prove that the end product is safe and approved based on traceable standards. I don't know if you can also read it, but that's the first question that Yolanda has. Do you want me to go through, or do you want to go one by one?
That's clear, so let's go to the second one. I think that Katima will take. It's very much the difference between certification and system certification and product certification. Over to you, Bjorn. Next one.
Second question, also from Yolanda Johnson. Do you have enough people to inspect each organization to perform the verification processes, especially many unexpected site visits or audits and supporting documents are thoroughly checked because we have served wrong products with stamp or approved or certified? Okay. Then this gentleman, Oliver from Hans Grohe. International approvals in Germany, we have and see issues unless the tapware standards, SANS 1480, SANS 226, and SANS 1808-35 will not revise to current technical requirements within the next month. Year by year, we are in discussion, but at least year by year, I have to resign and find out that our tapware is too eco for the market with enough water, without enough water. Alone, this statement should make you think about it. It's quite a long question, so I'm trying to figure out how to cut through. Okay, this is the brass. I maybe be skipping something. There's quite a lot here. Sorry, my apologies for that. Oliver, what I will do from my side, I will open up the mic as well from your section, because I see your question is very long, and I will do it like that, if you're okay with that.
So, Bjorn, I think before you open up the mic, let's maybe deal with the first two questions.
Yeah.
another approach that I'd like to take, so I can see now, I started off by saying I used to be on the other side. So I think to be fair as well, Bjorn, let's also, where the questions are straightforward, let's put it that way, and clear, let's deal with those. But let's also make a commitment that where there are the longer questions, we'll make sure that we respond to those in writing back to the individual. So we'll pass it to the panel members outside of the session, and we commit to providing those responses. So I'd rather deal with it in that way. I'm also being sensitive from a time point of view. We were contracted to wrap up at 12, and so I'd like to take these two questions specifically. So maybe, Katima, the product system certification, over to you.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Yolanda, for the question. So, from a ISO 9000 perspective, I think I would like to emphasize it's a process approach. The focus is on the process for any product under the sun, including a service. So it's not necessarily maybe talking to safety requirements of the product. So the focus is more on the process. But I also need to emphasize that ISO 9000 or management system certification by nature is voluntary, often. Including product certification is equally voluntary by nature. But these tend to be called upon in various regulations, depending on which sector and industry you operate in. So if it is mandatory and it's referenced in a particular regulation, by nature it becomes compulsory. So it's a voluntary and process related from ISO 9001. I think the safety issues that you're asking about is then purely it's direct to product certification. And the rigor associated with it is sometimes you may find a company wants to certify this bottle of water that is before us. They could easily get 9001 certified. It's a process. How do they go about manufacturing this bottle of water? But from a product perspective, it now includes drawing of samples and testing the product regularly. So that's the difference. So when you are part of the product certification, you still get the rigor of audits on an annual basis. Samples may be drawn 2 times per annum. Depending on the nature of the product, could be 6 times. In the case of cement, I'm using that as an example, sensitivity of the product. All the time it has to be tested. Results, the product must be consistent to type. And that has to happen throughout the cycle, and every 3 years we repeat that process. That looks at the safety issues. And the rigor and the regime also calls for self-controls in the production process, because there are routine tests that is required from a manufacturer of the product in question to equally make sure that they run those tests in-house as part of their production processes. But a process related, that's a slightly different on a 9001 and product certification. So, Chair, another question that also came out was whether do we inspect all organizations? From a Sabs perspective, the answer is yes in the context of Sabs clients. So all clients that are in our books, we visit them, all of them, per annum, twice, 6 times. It depends on the frequency and the nature of the product. So, but I think other issues are regulatory issues, where product is regulated, therefore the regulator must perform market surveillance, etc., in the open market. But I think we have to be realistic. We cannot visit everything and see everything. Hence, collaboration, it is key. And even those that are regulated on the basis of the risk associated to the product in question, a risk-based approach. And that will be the norm. But as and when there is a need for a specific issue, if it's sensitive, for it to be considered for regulation or for us to consider certifying it, we are always open for that. The benefits of certifying these products, there's also product redress. In the event there is a problem in the market, we can also contribute from a product recall, all other measures that we can put in place to restore the product, including taking it out of the market. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks for that. There was another question that alluded to the time it takes to update a standard, Matlale, and I'm not sure if there's a comment you have on that or whether it's something you can respond on separately, but over to you on that one, then we can go to the next round of questions.
Yeah, no, thanks, Chair. The updating of standards takes two forms. It could be an amendment of a standard, which we have set ourselves a time frame of saying 9 months, the amendment must be done within a period of 9 months. Then we've got updating of a standard that takes the form of a revision. So with a revision, we say it's kind of like, it's defined like you're rewriting the standard, so you're going to start from scratch and you can change anything in the standard. So that will take about 18 months or so. Yes, we're aware that there are certain standards that will take longer, depending on the interest, the complexity, and all of that. Because if there's a lot of interest in standards, you find that, industry itself can't agree on what it must be. So it tends to take longer than it should. Then obviously, same thing would apply to amendments. It could be that. And interest also works both ways. Interest could mean lack of interest, that you would then go to the committee and say, we would like to make this particular change to the standard. And then you don't get feedback. And if you don't get feedback, you can't move. So you have to keep going back to them. Then you resort to say, we will call a meeting. So the guys come and they debate. Then you have to circulate the document or the minutes for a period of time. So it then tends to take a bit longer than that. So just finally, maybe of late, yes, there were certain standards that were delayed, but the delay was just when SABS was just reorganizing itself so that we can provide better service and be more efficient. So going through that process, there are certain standards or projects that were a little bit delayed. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you for that clarity as well. And I think the key message in this is it's SABS doesn't do the amendment or the update to the standard in isolation. It's about a committee and it's a group of people represented by industry itself. And it's a clear message that we need to make sure gets out there, because there is this perception that SABS is taking too long. And what SABS and what Matlale's team does is coordinates the process itself for the amendment. Bjorn, what I'd like to then do, I think you've opened up the mic. Let's take the question. I'm not sure if there's one or two, but we'll then treat that as the last set of questions, and then we'll allow the panel to then have their final comments before we close the session. Bjorn, over to you.
But Oliver, you're online, so and your mic is open. Please attend. Thank you.
Yes, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, clear.
Hello?
We can hear you clearly, Oliver.
Can you hear
proceed?
me?
Yeah, clearly.
Okay, good morning. Thanks for inviting me or inviting us. Yes, and sorry for my longer statement. But you see that we from the industry especially, we have a lot of issues since years now. And regarding the change of the standards, and in the standards for sure, we have with the tapware, we are manufacturer of tapware with more than 5,000 employees. And it is our main target to deliver compliant products to the markets. That is our first target to do, not only for South Africa, we do that globally. But we see, especially in South Africa, and with the work, with the standard work, with the testings, that we have issues that our products fulfill not the flow rates. In other words, our products are too eco for the market. Where we hear or where we heard also from the water bylaws in Cape Town that they have to restrict the water for the usage. So that makes no sense. And parallel, we have a big issue, or we defined a big issue with the DZR usage, which is not clearly defined. Other countries like Australia and Finland, they do it quite modern. So they changed their requirements to a modern art, which is also compared to or very comparable to a practical usage. And the issue number one at the moment is that we see that we lose projects in the market, not only one or two. We lose them regarding, for sure, you lose a project only in case of pricing. But later on, we will see that in the projects, competitors, developers, plumbers, whoever deliver products which are not compliant, which are not SABS marked or Cheswick or whatever. And that makes us for sure a lot of, we are totally angry with that. And here it is, Mike, I have two questions at least. When the standards will be revised, that has to happen now within the next latest 5 to 6 months, in my opinion. And we can help here. And this is what I say, and what I said also the last years. The industry can support here, and I think the industry will support. And on the other side, I have the questions: who is doing the observation of the usage of compliant products in projects and in houses? Because in case we do and we spend that effort, and that is a lot of effort, also annual audits with SABS, and it is fantastic done with Charles Seedlow the last year. So he's a fantastic guy, and he's absolutely welcome with all of our plans, and he's doing a fantastic job. But parallel, we see we are working on the compliance, and we are looking for compliant products in the market. But parallel, we see others they don't care about, and yeah, we see a lot of frustration at the moment. And this is my question: how you want to do that quite better in the future?
Okay, I think that's noted. Björn, was there another question before we then close on and then respond?
There was another question from Yolanda, but she said she can't really answer from her computer. It was just regarding leaks and contamination are an issue because the water testing labs are getting complaints as if the tests were not done right. As their standards, are there standards guiding the municipality maintenance and quality departments? That's one question. And then there was another question from gentleman Eugene Henning. And it's more a comment, so it's not a question. Everybody is just jumping on the Green Council standards, which is not even compulsory standards. However, many architects and specifiers require these lower flow rates, and I think this is what Oliver also highlighted. Such a low flow rate, in my humble opinion, will guaranteed wreak havoc on the waste water systems and drainage systems. Simply too little water to transport the solids effectively away from the various treatment facilities. So that was just a comment from his side. And those are the ones that I have now highlighted. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Björn, for that. Matlale, I'm going to come to yourself on the revision of standards and the question from Oliver in terms of the role that can be played, what can be done in the next 6 months. So it's talking about specific standards. And I don't think I want you to maybe respond in this session, but rather for us to make sure that through Björn that there is a touch base between yourself and Oliver and his team, just so that you have that clarity and we can find a mechanism to move that forward. So I think that's how we deal with the first one, Björn, if you can note that. On the second aspect around the monitoring, especially the use of these various materials in, I heard it as housing projects. And Katima, I think you were alluding to some of the monitoring where it's compulsory. I don't know and maybe the panel can guide on that, is whether some of that are regulated requirements, which then means that there's a requirement for products that are used, but who's verifying that the products being utilized are indeed approved based on the requirements of the tenders itself. So I know this tends to apply to the building sector. I know that there are certain building requirements, but whether that's regulated or whether it's voluntary, I don't have that position. I'm not sure Katima or yourself, Ms. Kubana, can comment on that. Do you want to come in first, Katima?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And I think maybe we can also get specifics and more clarity from Oliver. But I think what I've noted is he's fine with the audits we are conducting, and he mentioned our auditor, Charles Titlo, there, so which I'll convey this message to him. But as to who's checking compliant products in buildings and the projects themselves, as I understood the question, again, if we know the specifics of products and whether they are regulated, in what scope, probably the relevant regulator should be able to assist. But from a Sabs perspective, we'll have interest to that question, because if there is a gap, indeed, how then do we equally approach that regulator and see if through our inspectorate function, can't we assist? If there is a role, if we can play in that regard. Thanks, Chair.
So Ms. Kubana, I think on that, it probably will, to what Katima's alluded to, it might merely require us, once we have that clarity, for you to probably guide and make sure that this gets to the right desk within your team, if it is a regulated item. But you can come in if there's a view on that. Over to you.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to agree with the previous speaker and also yourself to say if we are product specific, then we are able to assist. Like with legal metrology, if it's water meters, I'll be able to assist. And if anything out of the scope of my scope, then I'll be able to refer you to the relevant people to assist you. We work well together. We've got contacts of each other. We're able to refer to the correct. But I agree with you that if we're specific, then we're able to answer the colleague there properly. Thanks.
Great, thanks for that. So I think on Oliver's side, the approach we'll take beyond is as proposed. There'll definitely be contact with Oliver on the two fronts, one on the standard side, and then secondly in terms of the specific products and which area of regulation it might fall under, so that we can do the proper linkages. I think we'll also link up, Oliver has touched on certainly some of the audit team members that falls under Katima's side. And if there's anything further on that, we'll take it up. I think the acknowledgement of the performance of the team is key, because this is not only about where things are going wrong, but when things are going well, we need to also make sure that that message gets back to the guys on the ground, and that they recognize that the companies that they are working on appreciate the work they're doing. So, Oliver, thanks for those questions. Appreciated. The team will certainly get back to you. So I think we reached very much the end of the program for today. What I'd like to just do is give each of my panel members just 30 seconds, their parting shot, before we then close off on the session. And Ms. Kubana, if we're okay to start with yourself, just 30 seconds, your last comments, and then we close.
Thank you, Chair. My closing remarks will be, as the National Regulator of Composite Specification, our door is always open for you to participate when we are doing our regulations. And in this case, where we are dealing with water meters, I am the chairperson of SABSTC 70070, where you are welcome to participate in SANS 1529 Part 1 and Part 9, so that you can give your inputs and also be aware of what's happening within that standard that is called by the Legal Metrology Act. our door is always open for any concern of non-compliant product in the market. And also from our side, we are doing our best to approve water meters and also to do surveillance in the market. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, colleagues. I think from our end, just two comments. One being that organizationally, we are almost at the end of the mega changes we have been implementing in the organization. And we are very hopeful that as we implement these changes, there has to be an improvement in how we have been experienced by yourselves in terms of our service delivery. We are also working very hard to address the two key main concerns that we have been receiving from clients, that being our long turnaround times as well as lack of communication as to where we are in terms of our testing phases. These are issues that we are addressing, and hopefully if we can improve this, you will also experience us in a better way going forward. Thanks so much for your attendance.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you to everyone listening to us. My final remarks will be for us to really maintain and continue to thrive towards sustainability. The tripartite collaboration between regulators, industry, and consumers is critical. And if one of those is missing, I don't think we'll talk sustainability. So it's important that we continue to do so. And I think from a service excellence perspective, I think, I don't want to use this word renewal, it's used elsewhere. But we are saying Sabs is really repositioning itself, and if you really want to appreciate this, the experience will speak for itself. So we are aware that we suffered glitches in the past, but we are now on our path to restore all of that. Having competition is not the bad thing in the market. You tend to establish and know the truth because you tend to see two sides, and then you make a determination. So I think it's keeping us on the edge, and we are ready to engage and reclaim our space in the market. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Chair. Let me also just say my part in short, that participation in our committees is still free, unlike with other NSPs where to participate you have to pay them to sit in there. That we still follow the principles of openness, transparency, that any organization that has got a bona fide interest in the work that we do is very much welcome to join the committee. And just maybe to the issue of SDGs that has been spoken about, to say that the standards that we are doing these days as well, we are responding as well to the issue of SDGs. But I don't want to speak about SDG number 6, but I want to talk about one that relates to gender representation and gender representativity in our committees. Just to appeal to those who are participating and those who want to participate in future, that can we at least get your support. Chair, the stats don't look good at the moment, that of the 2,500 individuals who are serving our committees, only about 25% are females. So the entire 75% is male. And last the stats were released that 51% of the population of South Africa are women. So as SABS, we are working towards that to say, can we work together, at least raise the 30%, 40%, that won't be bad. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. Colleagues, there's a lot of brilliant people in South Africa and lots of great ideas and innovation. And I think I congratulate SABS for providing the service they do to help make some of those innovations and ideas a reality, and to give a platform to make sure that we are compliant. I think the importance, like Oliver mentioned, to review the current standards is very important so that we can accommodate new technology as it comes through, so that we don't leave people out of the opportunities that exist. You know, we welcome water-saving innovations and products. We welcome issues on dry sanitation, and we need to review things like sewers. Our last speaker mentioned that they're aware that low-flush toilets, for example, may compromise the sewers. We need to look at those standards to make sure they don't, because we have to move in that direction in the future to make sure that we do have 100% available water in 2030, and that we do address all the leaks from 45% down to 15%, and together we can do that. SDG 6 is a critical platform, and I welcome you to come and join our WSSLG meetings every quarter. I'm sure the chair can give us information in that regard. And also the chair put a challenge out to you to see if anyone could guess my accent. And if anyone hasn't guessed it, 4 words to give you a hint: you'll never walk alone. Thank you very much.
That was fantastic, Mark. So well done on that. I think that brings. This brings us to the end of the program. It's been a pleasure as the program manager to deal with a group of panelists that really are well equipped, really knowledgeable of their areas, and it's made my task very easy. But none of this would have been possible without you as the delegates that have decided to attend this session, those both physically in the room and those online. So with that said, thank you very much again. It's really been, for me, a very fruitful morning. And can we have a round of applause to yourselves and the panel? Great. I think there's some meals that have been served, so we'll have an opportunity just to chat a little bit further. Let's take up that time, and with that said, thanks again. Enjoy the rest of the afternoon.